Alright guys, we're diving straight into a game. We're playing Monsters vs Golyat in the Season of Love in seasonal mode. So let's take a look at our mulligan. Like, the Ghoul needs a graveyard to work properly, so we're probably mulliganing that way. Yeah, there we go. This looks decent, although 2 Nekkers might be a bit too much, especially since we're playing a Spear. I'd say this looks pretty decent. So I'm diving straight into a game. I will bring up the deck list on screen. I noticed in my YouTube analytics, like most of you guys, just skip the deck explanation and fast forward in the video straight into the game. So I figured I'd give you guys what you want. So let me know if you like this commentary style of videos in the comments below. I will just be going over the plays I am making in this pre-recorded game, and during the game I will also talk about some of the choices I've made in the deck. As you can see, the Nekker spawns 2 bodies, and this is an effect that's generally very strong in this game mode. Like, a card has a certain item budget or power budget, so to speak, and a lot of it being tied to deploy abilities or being spread over multiple bodies is very strong, because your opponent can usually only steal 1 unit a turn, and especially with especially when playing versus the Sabertooth, that's great, because we want to keep 2 units on the same row to avoid the saber damage. So our hand looks alright. It's pretty flexible. We can obviously not see my hand right now, but this season's seasonal mode is all about being flexible, reacting to your opponent. Here I am eating, or consuming rather, the Yghern, and that puts the Ghoul at 18 power, which is obviously very hard for my opponent to steal. So that's one thing monsters got going for them in this season's seasonal mode. They can consume other units and be pretty much out of reach for your opponent to steal. The Spear is also a great addition because it allows you to have a say in what cards you steal when there are multiple enemies you want to steal. Like here, it increases the odds to get the engine. Unfortunately, it gets summoned to the ranged row. Otherwise, it would have been even better. Like, our opponent is playing a lot of 4 power units, which is something that's actually a pretty valid tactic. If like all cards you're playing have the same amount of power, your opponent can only steal so much of them, you know. So the Hamadryad with Vitality is obviously the prime target to steal right here. So I'm playing Vivienne, which is really cool because the Ghoul has 5 provisions. That's because or that makes that Vivienne gets boosted by 5, so she ends up having just enough power to steal the highest unit of my opponent. This might be the only deck you'll ever play Vivienne in. So that's what I try to accomplish with this deck, like having cards that are very flexible, have a lot of power budget tied to deploys, multiple bodies. You have some very high tempo, high power units that are very hard to steal for your opponents. It has some consumes. Obviously the Spear is very strong, like you can see in this play right now. It just allows great control of the board of your opponent, which is very strong. Which is honestly, I really like this season's seasonal mode. I really like Season of Love, but for deck building it's not very interesting, because you just want to accomplish the same thing with every deck. Like, you want to have like a good variation of power on the unit you're running, so you can respond to your opponent very well, because that's the winning strategy. And there's really only one winning strategy. It's just there are several ways to accomplish it. But so this is interesting, because now the Saber is actually not in stealth mode. So the Wild Hunt Warriors are obviously amazing for their provision cost. They're very flexible, setting up the board of your opponent in a way that you steal as much stuff as possible. Like we just waited for the saber to hit 9 power, and now our leader ability is just worth 18 points, which is great. Like, it actually surprises me how many people are not playing around the leader ability. Sometimes it's unavoidable because you'll end up having an engine that will reach 9 power eventually, and that's why I really like the 0 power, especially when you're running some Thrive minions like Nekker and the Endrega Larva. Just very solid. And it's one of the few ways you are able to steal 2 units in one turn. So I'm checking my graveyard here to see whether or not I want to keep Ghoul. End up not going for it. I probably would have kept it if I had Ice Giants in my graveyard, which I don't. But this is a very high power hand, a high tempo hand. Like, it's very hard for Golyat to play units that have 10 power or more. So we are obviously running the high tempo package with old Speartip, Yghern, and Ozzrel, and Golyat as well. Like, actually, Golyat has never been removed in the games I've played, so that works very well with the ghouls as well. The ice giants serve the same purpose. That coupled with the Nekkers and the Endrega Larvas and all the stuff in between, that's mostly reactionary, but I think those high power units are really strong in this game mode because not a whole lot of classes are able to play units that have 10 power or more. Like, as you can see here, like, my opponent plays a decent amount of strong units. It's just that my units have more power per card. So let's see if my opponent can get 10 points with the Neuromancy. Probably will. Should probably have targeted the Golyat, but it was enough. But we still enter round 3, 1 card up on our opponent. So that's great news, because then we have less say, and that allows us to dictate what minion we steal last, especially with the Ghoul in hand. Like, the Ghoul is very flexible because you can consume like a whole bunch of cards that allows you to set up the Ghoul so that you steal something with a lot of power. Did end up mulligan it away because like half of the cards in my my deck were very powerful. So the Caravan Vanguard is a card you see a lot, which is funny because that makes it even better, because the more often you see 3 power units, the better it will be to run 3 power units. So it's like like a reinforcing thing. But these cards really help if you are trying to protect engines that have like 3 power. Like, when you have multiple units with 3 power, it's very hard to control or to steal them. So there we go. So we are playing versus Skellige now, which is very interesting. They are running Patriciidal Fury. That means they will be able to steal something that has 11 health, which we are not running. Like, maybe if they damage old Speartip by 1. The Nekker goes away, the Ghoul goes away, the Ghoul goes away because I don't have anything in the graveyard yet. And the Nekkers are basically in there to steal the Endrega Larvas back. This is especially important if you are playing versus Nilfgaard, because Nilfgaard pretty much, like, almost always copies your Endrega Larvas, so they end up having a lot of 1 power units as well. So that's why I am running Endrega Larvas and Nekkers as well. So the mid-range of this deck is made up of a lot of powerful tools like Dandelion Poet. Allows you to play 2 cards, potentially stealing 2 units in 1 turn of your opponent. It has Dudu, which is an awesome card which should be run basically by any deck in this seasonal game mode, because it allows you to basically steal any card your opponent plays that does not boost itself. Like if your opponent has an engine that gets 1 more power every game, like Dudu will just be a base copy. So obviously the power level won't match, so you have to be careful of that, but other than that it is a great tool to steal like pretty much any unit from your opponent. That was actually a pretty clever play. Don't see that often. So we are taking his boat, which is awesome because it hands us another Caravan Vanguard. I play the Yghern next to the priest that damages it by 1 every turn, which is pretty dangerous, because if my opponent deals enough damage to the Yghern, he will get destroyed. But I do have a Ghoul in hand, so I will probably, I don't remember, but I will probably end up eating him or consuming the Yghern. Or a pass, which makes a lot of sense. I love how I just stole his guy and build around it. Like, that's one of the most rewarding feelings in this seasonal game mode. So I still have 2 Caravan Vanguards at hand. I'm pretty much watching what I have in my graveyard right here. I don't have a whole lot of high power stuff in it, so I mulligan the Ghoul away. Another great thing about the Spear is that it's a very strong opening play, like because there is so much power in going second. It is very strong to open with a card your opponent usually doesn't react to, or opening with a non-unit card your opponent can steal. You just can see I'm torn between getting my tribes down and getting the Spear down. Because those kind of compete and both want to be played like very early on. I end up going for the Thrive card first, which is probably the right play because he might end up playing cards I need to respond to with units, so I would have a chance of missing Thrive. That was actually a pretty decent play from his part. But this is what I mean with playing a lot of cards with the same power level. If you want to steal something specific, it makes it really hard, but just honestly a pretty valid strategy. So he's dropping an engine, which is pretty interesting, which I cannot steal right now. We'll probably end up having it. Just needs to get boosted in order for me to be able to capture it. Like, there we go. And now we're able to snag it up with one of our ice giants. There we go. We cannot go for that tactic anymore. Actually, a pretty good combo with Oriole of the British side coming down. But we can just wait for his engine to reach 12 power and then steal it. Or we can use the Spear coupled with the leader ability to steal it. Like, the Spear gives a lot of flexibility. this is interesting because I can use the spear on his big bear. Ah, I end up going for the Ghoul steel instead. Which is alright, like a lot of lines of play were possible right there. Like I could have waited for it to become like 12 power and then steal it with the big spear tip. Maybe save the spear charges for Oriole and steal it later on with the leader ability. Like when you have like spear down on board, it's open up a lot of possibilities. Which is arguably what the game mode is about. So here I'm probably reading the Rupture tooltip, seeing what it does, seeing whether or not I have to be afraid. Just don't see it that much on ladder or on seasonal. There we go. We still steal this other big guy. So that was just 1 out of 3 to get the Drakkar longship. Not even. Like it boosted itself. So that was a pretty weird play on my part. I mean, this game is going just fine, but that was a weird play. Would probably be better to kill off one of the 3 power units and steal the other one. The Draco Turtle. It's a very cool card. It's just that I stole a lot of cards to synergize with. At this point I'm in a pretty good spot. I still have a lot of high power minions in my hand, so when the Draco Turtle gets boosted or the ship gets boosted, I still have tons of ways to steal high power units. Like I'm probably checking out if I can steal the Rocket Turtle with the Ozzrel, but it ends up being too big of a unit to steal the Rocket Turtle right now. I arguably could have checked his graveyard as well, right there, but sometimes it's complicated because you have so many options with the spear and maybe even with Vivienne. Like you're even checking out how many provisions each card on the board has to check out all of your options. Like I can get the Ozzrel to 5 power if I consume one of his units by playing him on the melee row. I go for the pass, which is honestly a reasonable option, because when he plays a 9 power unit, which is the best he can do, he will gain 18 points on me. So that won't even be enough. He is going for it. He knew he was done. He was done for. Alright, we're playing versus Nilfgaard. It's the imposter anti-fun police. Well, at least it's not locked down. So I probably mulliganed the Wild Warrior away because I already had 2 and you just generally want to increase your options. I ditched the Nekker, which I think was a misplay, because versus Nilfgaard it's really important to be able to steal back Endrega Larvas, because they have the card where they play the spying card and they copy a card you have and the deploy will go off. It's basically the whole reason I'm playing Nekkers and Endrega Larvas, which is in most matchups a bit too much or a bit too heavy on the Thrive side of things. But I should have definitely kept that one in this matchup. Rest of the hand is looking fine though. I have a lot of options. Yeah, like there we go. This is exactly sexy. This is sexy. This is exactly why I should have kept the Nekker as well, because this will happen in virtually any matchup versus Nilfgaard in seasonal mode. Like if I would have had Nekker, I could have just killed the Duchess informant. I can speak, but I still manage with the Wild Hand Rider. Ooh, Glynis comes down, which is actually pretty scary because my opponent can get a significant amount of points with Glynis rather. So I remember I am debating here whether to kill Glynis right now or to wait, because with my hero power I can kill her or can steal her when she reaches 9 power, and I do have, or she does have a like 2, so she will likely hit 9 power next turn. And I managed to kill off the Endrega Larva this way, so that was actually a decent play if I were to say so myself. So that's why Adda Striga is pretty good as well. You will usually have dominance because of the high tempo, high power package we talked about earlier. The Barghest and a single Endrega Larva, or Endrega Warrior rather, are just great flexible tools because it allows you to consume units, so you can dictate how much power they will have when coming down. So they are very flexible. And you can play with Spear being in the middle as well when it comes to Endrega Warrior, so you can just consume one unit to the side. Pretty easy. I'm actually not too sure why I used the Spear charge right there. Maybe to get it down to like 3 power for the Caravan Vanguard. Another Duchess informant.
My duty? To stick my nose where it doesn't belong.
Luckily, we have a second Ice Giant. So with the Spear we are able to steal back Glynis again. Which is great because it's just too dangerous to let our opponent have it. Although we do still have our leader ability to steal it back once it reaches 9 power. Another route to take is to eat Glynis with the Ghoul, but he uses treachery to get Glynis to 2 power, so that makes her a lot less desirable. So this is what I meant, like a lot of people just fail to play around Force of Nature because he just handed us 9 points on a platter and he wasted his luck. Will I eat the Glynis or the Duchess informant? End up eating the Duchess informant, boosting the Ghoul up to 6 power, stealing the injured Ice Giant, and I am increasing the gap, being 50 points ahead, being very comfortable. Like I should take passing into consideration. Like, alright, the choice has been made for us. We won with 1 card down, which is acceptable. It's not the greatest. And we are both out of leader charges as well. Like now I have two Nekkers, but the 2 Duchess informants are already out of play in the graveyard of our opponent. Doesn't say everything when playing versus Nilfgaard. So I probably learned from my mistake, seeing the Duchess informants being used against my Endrega Larvas, although arguably. So I just go straight out of the gate, trying to bleed my opponent. That's a pretty strong opener, honestly. Not too sure if this is a whole lot better than dry passing, but there's something to say for getting Golyat in the graveyard for Ozzrel in round 3. This is probably a good time to dry pass. Well, it's not dry when you already played a ton of wet cards, but we still got another card out of our opponent, equalizing the amount of cards we will both take into round 3. So let's see what we can make out of this best of 3. Like, now we have the Ghoul in our hand, which is a pretty potent tool going into round 3 because we have a lot of different bronze stuff in our graveyard by now. Checking my deck. Putting a Nekker away. Picking up the second Caravan Vanguard is pretty huge here, I'd say. Like, we have Dudu and Yghern and Ozzrel still in our deck, so there is a lot of potential for an upgrade, so I think I end up mulliganing something away. I mulligan a Nekker away and get an Yghern in return, which I think is very nice, since our opponent already played his Duchess Informants. I do believe they can play cards out of their graveyard pretty easily, but probably not worth playing around. Like, this is pretty annoying. Like, Urchin has like 4 power and I have no way to steal it. It won't boost itself. There's armor as well, which is okay in this game mode because that makes it harder for your opponent to interact with the amount of power your cards have. Like, Experimental Remedy is a cool card as well. Just has the tactic that makes you play a card from your opponent's faction or out of your opponent's graveyard, stuff like that, that lets you pick between different units, which is very strong because it's very flexible. Like, this is pretty annoying because now I am regretting mulliganing the Nekker away again. Trying to think of a way to get the Urchin on my side of the board, but that will be pretty hard. So I think Yghern is the play here. You don't want to play your Yghern with just a few cards in your hand. Probably the first card you should get down after you've played your Thrive stuff. But we're in a rough spot right now because our opponent's board is a lot stronger than our board at the moment. It's pretty hard to steal specific stuff. Like, it's a bit rock, paper, scissory what your opponent plays and whether or not you have an answer to that. Right, that it's decent, but that would probably have been better later into the game. End up just playing the big guys because it's unlikely I will steal something that's 12 power, but the Ghouls and the Caravan Vanguard and Vivienne are very good options to steal some units from my opponent. Another 4 power unit, which is annoying. It might be worth looking into. Here I was very quick on the Caravan Vanguard, not stealing anything. Not that it would have mattered. Like, he is playing units with a pretty low power level, which is awkward for us because we can play the Ghoul, but that will be 6 power at least because we'll have to consume the Endrega Larva. On the other hand, his locks don't accomplish a whole lot either. Note that I do save some pretty flexible options for later in the round to make the most out of their unit stealing capacity. Hey, Viper, what's your mentor? It is. So there should be a way to steal it right now. Checking all the provision cost of my cards. So I see a ton of ice giants there. It's an easy choice. That will allow us to steal his 9 power unit. I just go for the consume to consume the highest power unit, putting the Ghoul at 14 power, which is pretty safe. Pretty much out of reach. And now we do have a lead. And his luck doesn't accomplish a whole lot. And to rub it in, we can probably finally steal the urchin. So there you have it, folks. This was my take on the monster deck for Season of Love seasonal mode. I am really dying to hear your feedback on this commentary style. I would love to hear your thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys will leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.